Shout out to our sponsors at IconBet. Open source, decentralized gaming, no deposits, play straight from your wallet. IconBet, made by the players, for the players. Eye on Icon is proudly supported by Icon Nation and the Icon community. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Eye on Icon. This is the episode where we go around the Icon ecosystem, but this time it's special. This is one of the first BTP integrations that has been announced, Edgeware, and we actually talked to Thom from the Edgeware agency, who's the director of the Edgeware agency. He comes on the show and talks about Edgeware, Polkadot, the auction process, you name it, he covers it all. And it's fantastic. With me as well right now, Icongrapher, how are you?
I'm doing well, and yeah, it was cool to have our first kind of future BTP integration chat with us and kind of start becoming part of the community. I think it sounds like you're kind of lurking in their community, already becoming part of it too, just to learn more about what Edgeware is and what it's got going on and everything like that. Icon announced probably about a month or two ago that they'd be integrating with the Polkadot ecosystem. This was kind of the shorthand for it was, we're integrating with Polkadot. That's not quite the way it kind of works. As we kind of discuss in this interview, there's a process called there's this thing called parachains, which the metaphor I've used is that it's kind of a hub and spokes of a wheel where the hub is kind of Polkadot itself, and then there's all these other chains that are floating around there that are technically separate chains, but still integrate with the kind of the mothership, as it were. So their transactions essentially get stamped on that mothership, and that's kind of the main central hub and everything like that. And Thom goes into a bit more kind of technical detail about how that works and everything like that. But I want to be clear. So Edgeware is one of those side, parachain. Right now they're candidates because they have an auction process, which again Thom goes into. There's two or three other parachain candidates that BTP will be integrating with as well. I can't remember off the top of my head what they are, but they're very easy to find online. So they're just one of the ones that we're integrating with. But it does give us very, very good access to the Polkadot ecosystem as a whole, which again, Thom kind of explains the benefits of that as well. So I just want to kind of create that context just so people have a better understanding of what integrating with Polkadot actually means and how Edgeware fits into that process.
Look, I think what was great, I don't know about you, Icongrapher, but Thom came across as incredibly intelligent, and he had a way of explaining things that were quite technical, and it sounded technical, but it also sounded simplified. Like, it clicked in my mind every time he was explaining. Some stuff did go over my head, but most of it, especially understanding what Edgeware was and realizing that yes, they want to be part of the Polkadot ecosystem, but that is not what they don't need that to exist. There's still a separate chain that has their own security, and their tokenomics, etc. So that was a real standout for me, and I cannot stress enough this isn't icon focused, but what you will start to realize and what clicked for me personally is as he started to explain what Edgeware is, what place it holds in the crypto world, why it's interested in the Polkadot ecosystem, and then we touch on the BTP integrations and some of the Dapps that are being built on Edgeware, you'd start to realize how big BTP really is, and even through Thom's explanation, their goal isn't about Edgeware, it is about how much they can integrate with everything else in the crypto ecosystem. That's definitely some of the highlights I took away from the conversation. Icongrapher?
Yeah, I think you said it pretty well. Definitely a very, very sharp guy. Sometimes stuff we went a little bit over my head at times, but that just means I got to do some more research. So that's how it goes.
Definitely. Look, without any more, let's tune in. We dive straight into the interview, and after this, I cannot stress enough, right till the very end, Thom is dropping nuggets constantly, including, I loved how he talked about the token distribution process that was a lock drop process, which was very unique, and the success of it. It got my brain thinking a million ways. So definitely one to listen to all the way through. So without further ado, let's listen to what Thom has to say. Thom, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Really appreciate having you on board. Would you like to give everyone an intro who you are? And yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Thom Ivy. I am the director of the Edgeware agency, which is a DAO within the Edgeware blockchain smart contract platform. And so what that means is that my organization, which grew out of the community, was given kind of a mandate and some funding over the next year to fulfill a certain set of deliverables and almost act as if we were kind of like a Web3 native version of a foundation. So guiding the protocol and helping it achieve its adoption and growth goals.
Oh, fantastic. That is quite a lot and very concise. Great. Thank you, Thom. And what ecosystem does your protocol belong to?
So Edgeware uses, actually, it's the premier, the first one to do this, the Substrate platform. So you might have heard of this in terms of the Polkadot system or network. So Polkadot uses Substrate, and Polkadot is kind of the use case of Substrate as a relay chain, as designed by Parity Technologies, which is one of the kind of founding teams involved in Ethereum.
Fantastic. Okay, and so I think can we take a moment to talk about the Polkadot system? So I believe you've set your set Edgeware set up, and you're competing for one of the auction slots in the Polkadot system. Could you tell us, Iconus, a bit about that process, why that exists, what it's there for? Yeah, let's start with that, and then we'll keep expanding.
Absolutely. So I want to go back a couple of steps and talk about how interoperability kind of split over the past 5 years. There's the kind of ETH2 model, which says that we should have homogeneous, meaning kind of the same state on each chain and these set of sharded chains with a beacon chain in the middle that will help route interactions. Polkadot took a very different and radical route and said, let's have different chains, heterogeneous state chains, each which ultimately may become their own DApp. So increasing the sovereignty of applications and attempting to scale using this really interesting nested set of relay chains. So Polkadot is the first relay chain. Technically, it's the second because I think Kusama launched first, which is a canary net. And so Polkadot's the first. And in order to use its slots, you have to do this process called a parachain auction or crowd bond. So if you don't have enough natural funds, you're not a dot whale just sitting around wondering what to do with them. You can appeal to the dot holder community and say, hey, this is our chain. This is what we're looking to do. And if you support us, we'll be able to reward you using the tokens that arrive through inflation on our network. So the main goal is basically you want to offer dot holders better returns than they would otherwise have on staking their dots on Polkadot. And in return, you get access to this really cool functionality in terms of a parachain slot. And one ways to kind of think about what a slot is this United Nations and member state model. So the relay chain reduces the security costs of all the networks because they kind of pool their needs together. So it's almost like the United Nations security force. And so the economies of scale apply, and the costs of that security go down, meaning that those individual networks need less inflation. So it makes, we think back to the original, point of crypto was to reduce firm costs and make it cheaper for people to coordinate online and do all these things without middlemen. This is kind of the next evolution there, where you pool all of your funds, you get better security, and you also get the diplomacy benefits. So now you can message pass in trusted routes, kind of like the United Nations as well. So we like to think about Edgeware applying for these parachain slots as being, applying to be a member state within this set of trusted parties.
Yeah, that's
And so,
fantastic.
just to kind of back up a little bit. So you mentioned there was the schism of sorts as far as interoperability is concerned. You mentioned the homogeneous and the heterogeneous chains. I think you mentioned Ethereum, and you mentioned I think you said layer 2 or something like that. Essentially, that's and that would be, for example, Matic is probably among the most notable of that, to where it's more directly associated with Ethereum as it's a side chain. Can you A, is that basically that is that the one model you're kind of referring to where they're kind of more split off from the main, I guess the main chain, you would say? Is that kind of what you're referring to with that first category as far as the homogeneous?
Yeah, I think layer twos actually kind of coexist with layer one scaling strategies. So if we think about just ETH2 being that layer one scaling strategy in Ethereum, and then we've got the layer two scaling, which is, rollups, optimism, ZK, all these
Right.
really just blisteringly cool technologies. And so these can all coexist. And those layer two technologies can also work on things like Edgeware because we support EVM. So they're kind of chain agnostic on the layer two side. The thing that I think, layer one scaling differences, come into play is like in Ethereum today, you see that regardless of whether you're, using a compute heavy, lots of calculations, derivatives, exchange tool, or if you're just trying to send money to Coinbase to get, to do a payout, you're kind of experiencing these high fees. And that's because of Ethereum's kind of homogeneous state system, not differentiating too well. So it's almost as if the users who don't need a lot of function subsidize the users who would otherwise pay for a lot of function. So I'm particularly excited about the Polkadot model because if you imagine a Dapp for every chain and a token and its own economics and fee structures, you start to see just fee segregation where people are no longer paying for the rich dude who's doing the rich dude stuff. They're just paying for only what they use.
Oh, interesting. So there's 21 parachain slots. Do I have that number right?
Last I checked, I think the first year there'll be about 100 slots. I think half are being reserved for public, like public good. So I think the first public good slot is called statement, and like central banks and other like public utilities can use them to deploy assets onto the network in a secure fashion. So I think it'll be like and I think these details are still coming out, so don't quote me.
Right.
But
Right.
So in Kusama today, it's about one slot every week, I believe, or every other week. So it'll be probably 3-4 months at minimum before the parachain auctions for Polkadot kick off or really get in the zone.
And I assume that's just kind of is that a scaling thing where they want to kind of gradually ramp up the network activity, and so that's why there's not infinite number of slots to begin with, and why they're kind of expanding. Is that the reason, or is there a different reason why they're starting from that standpoint?
Yeah, I think that is absolutely a concern. The other one is because of that crowd loan process, the bonding of the dots from dot holders. If you said, okay, everyone's going at once, you might see less ability for holders to accumulate new dots so that they can loan more out to these new projects, and have to kind of spend all their arcade money at once in one day.
So my understanding of it is at least in the initial phase, there'll be a lot of competition to try and get these slots. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think on Kusama, which is kind of they say like expect chaos is the Kusama tagline, and originally it was built to kind of have a test net, but it's an incentivized test net, so therefore we call them canary nets. Like canary in the coal mine is the reference. And so we thought, initially, because Kusama had seen such massive interest over the past couple months, that the slots would be quite expensive. But based on the teams that are launching and the amount of demand, they're actually ended up being a bit cheaper than we would have thought. For Polkadot, the thought is that because Kusama is saying, yeah, we're kind of the testing ground, teams that are investing in DeFi, in like really high level and secure minded projects will probably wait until Polkadot. So yeah, what we hear is like that demand for Polkadot slots will be extremely high because teams will want that reduction in platform risk and also governance risk.
So then I guess, and I hope I'm not repeating myself here. So what is Edgeware's pitch to go for the slot and get a slot?
Absolutely. Great question. So it's really easy. Polkadot doesn't run smart contracts natively, and we do.
Simple answer.
Yeah. So the way, this whole like chain for each purpose, the chain of Polkadot specifically provides security. It's security as a service to blockchains, and it accrues value by providing that service and creating that value. So in Edgeware's case, what we say is, okay, well, all of the chains that you provide security to probably would like the ability to run some smart contracts. And so we support both EVM runtimes and our native Rust or WASM runtime, which is kind of a cool beast. Um, and then all the other chains that connect to Polkadot can, interoperate through us and allow users to upload logic and interact with their modules and palettes, and it becomes very economic, and very active over time. So beyond just running smart contracts, the promise of Edgeware is we are the oldest substrate chain. We are the oldest smart contract platform in Polkadot. We have almost over a year of governance experience. We've run multiple upgrades, and we're just the guys. We're solid. So that's our bet. Is honestly we're the safe ones. There's a lot of new teams who are doing exciting stuff on gaming and creator economies and very kind of like unifunctional things. But what we know is that Edgeware, conforms to a very specific and easy to understand investment thesis, which is people want to run smart contracts in a way that reduces their governance risk and their platform risk once again.
Yeah, great. And Edgeware as a whole is a DAO as well, right? So what I gathered from my exploring the protocol a bit is you are looking for people with all kinds of ideas to come to Edgeware and essentially pitch their ideas of how it can help aid and get funding via the DAO. Could you talk us through that vision around the DAO aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the original DAO was the set of people who were coordinating in a decentralized fashion around a common pool of funds. I'm assuming you remember the DAO. I think it was Ryan Zero who started it.
Yeah, back in that's what created the initial kind of I'd say the first and major Ethereum crisis back in 2016, correct? Just for
the one and only.
Those, yeah, exactly. Just so for those who don't have the full context of that.
Yeah. So the key thing about that was, like, again, decentralized group of people coordinating around a central pool of funds. So Edgeware has a community fund or an on-chain treasury, and this thing accrues funds almost like a nation state does. It gets them from a portion of transaction fees, it gets a portion from inflation, and it gets a portion in suboptimal conditions for validators as a penalty to make them clean up their act, more or less. So right now we've probably got around 500 million edge tokens in this treasury, and we think about there are other protocols like Uniswap who also have similar community funds that are technically different but basically the same purpose. That now, based on the value of the token, have accrued billions of dollars. It's insane what we're seeing. So DAOs in the future will be highly valued by their ability to manage their assets and deploy funds to create value within their networks and ecosystems. And so our idea is we have this kind of like waterfall where everybody in our community decides, what do we want to build this year? What do we want to build? What kind of projects do we want to incentivize to be present? Who do we want to maintain our core development? Right now, we have a totally decentralized core development process where a couple of different teams, including Parity and one of our founding teams, Commonwealth Labs, contributes, but they have to kind of pitch the community and say, hey, this is what we're looking to do this quarter, and look at what we've done previously, and maintain that trust with the community. So we have a couple different ways that people exert their political voice in the Edgeware level DAO, or chain DAO, is sometimes what I say. So they have the ability to elect council members. There's about I think there's like 12 of us, of which I am one, and they do this through a couple of complex algorithms, but basically it's token voting. And then they also have a referenda body, so kind of two branches of government. In the referenda body, anybody can basically run direct democracy. You can enact proposals that would alter the runtime of the chain, and because the chain is written in Rust and uses this WASM runtime, it's like if you were on a plane and you all voted to install new wings while it was flying, is the metaphor. So we can do these upgrades without having to fork or halt the chain, all through these voting mechanisms. And that's kind of the top of it. Is two bodies of governance. One that's a little more executive or watchdog, and the other is a direct and open democracy, and then this common pool of funds.
Cool, that's great. Okay, so I think this leads well into your token, and I thought it would be great to get a bit of an overview of your tokenomics and how your token works in the ecosystem and as part of the DAO. Could you share some insights on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a utility token traditionally, but I like to stretch it a little bit and call it a super utility token because we're inventing some new use cases. So traditionally, you can vote, you can stake it, as we're a nominated proof of stake network, which is kind of like delegated proof of stake, except for individuals have voting power, not only validators, which is kind of the traditional DPoS model that you might have seen in EOS. And I think, personally, that was a great improvement to switch to, everybody being able to have political voice, because otherwise you saw power accrue to a couple of very large validators. So we've got voting, we've got staking, improving the network security and earning returns on that. And then you've also got, a set of kind of secondary rewards that we're building out called Edge Pass. And so in Edge Pass, you can almost think about this as like your citizenship and your social goods that you are entitled to by participating in the network and assisting in network security. So if you stake a certain amount on Edgeware, you will get access to potentially digital and reproducible goods like a welfare, wellness apps, whether this is yoga, maybe, tips for, or access to apps that help you like eat more healthily. Our idea is like, where do people struggle with their existing nation states, and how can we help supplement that and offer increasing value without having to necessarily increase the costs of producing those goods? So that's why digital goods are so interesting. In the future, we imagine that, you might even be able to go on the street and flash your NFT badge or something and get access to a gym. And this could all be subsidized by the network because it's a DAO and it can do this collective bargaining and funding of goods.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I think I could spend a day picking your brain on variations to this and how it could be applied. That's great. I think Icongrapher, have you got any questions there?
No, not on that topic. I think you explained that pretty well.
Yeah. Look, I think this is great. Leading into the next one, so the governance aspect, and I think this will hit close to home for all Iconists as well, because one of the new Dapps that launched on our ecosystem, Balanced, had its first community-driven vote system that probably various DAO members tried to put a proposal together. Some of those aspects haven't been built out yet, so it was done very informally via Telegram, and everyone was quite vocal about the proposed changes, which was heard straight away. But this is perfectly leading into what are some of the lessons you could share that you've learned from decentralized governance, like how managing community decisions, or actually getting input from the community to arrive at what the proposal should look like. We would love some insights there.
Oh, it's so tough. My joke is like Harvard Business School does not prepare you to operate decentralized businesses, operations, ventures. The skills are so different. It's half political, half communications, and half back channel and saving face and forming alliances. It's very much probably like parliaments, as I imagine. I'm in the US here, so I've never experienced one, but I've seen them on TV and they look very dramatic. So the biggest thing I would say is figure out what your values are and what you align on, and make them as explicit as possible, so that you always have this, a North Star that people can refer to when you're discussing the validity or the worth of a proposal. Everything that you do should be in the goal of enhancing the sense of legitimacy, bringing more people on board, creating more solidarity and consensus. And that requires extreme transparency. We found this out the hard way recently by a decentralized process of funding exchange integrations for our token. And we had a small group of people that of my agency group that were entrusted with the responsibility of converting our tokens OTC to funds that we could use to pay those exchanges in their preferred currency. And doing all that accounting in the open is very difficult. It was difficult to find buyers who were okay with having their financial decisions out in the open, including their addresses. It was difficult to negotiate with the exchanges because they're traditionally going to give you a non-disclosure agreement and you're not going to be able to share the details. So we had to go to our community and say, hi, everybody, we need, somewhere between X dollars and Y dollars, but we can't tell you the exact amount. And, please trust us because this is for a good cause. So reputation comes into play, and building reputation becomes essential. So, a lot of people want to start with decentralized governance and shoot for the moon, but if you want to make it sustainable, you've got to prove yourself in smaller amounts. So, a tiered system where you let people grow into their role in the network, I think is key. Understanding that moving forward with a lot of consensus, and if there isn't full consensus, allowing people to fork. This is something that I think we overlook a lot in crypto, even though it's fundamental to how our technology operates, is that if you don't have a group that's 100% behind a critical decision, let them go their own way. And that's kind of our idea in Edgeware is we disagree by competing. So we support people who think there's a better way to do it, and we even give them money to try and go prove it. And so that tolerance and that pluralistic approach tends to be key for us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, that very valuable insights there. Thank you. Everything you were saying, I was reflecting on some of the events that transpired in the DAO recently. So definitely a lot of takeaways. So I think this is a great chance now to touch on a BTP component, and what I kind of want to get is not a technical understanding, but I kind of want to hear the story around when you first heard. So obviously someone from Icon in the background approached Edgeware, the DAO, and proposed we have this unique solution that can integrate our chains, cross-chain interoperability. What, from your point of view, how did this transpire, and what made you think, this is great, let's throw it to the DAO, let's make decisions, let's get teams working on it?
Yeah, a lot of these things happen in just a very natural networking process. Somebody, has a friend who is working with Icon technology or is familiar with the Icon community. Maybe they even kind of discovered Edgeware after being deeply involved with Icon and said, maybe I can connect my old community with my new community. This happens a lot. We have a similar kind of thing going on with Decred somewhat, where teams or communities rather, that share value alignment. And in Icon's case, it was this exploration of governance and decentralization and shifting to kind of a more native Web3 model that I think really made our communities say, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. So that's the start, is who are you value aligned with, and how can you engage that value aligned community in a way that matters? So for us, it was a conversation about the technology. It was a knowledge swap around governance practices. It was, asking specific members of our community how we can help inform the technology that underpins your governance. And we recommended a site called Commonwealth.im, which we use, that connects directly to our chain, almost like a chain-enabled Reddit. So, what's our stack, and tapping into our pool of talent. In return, the partnerships have a PR effect, and they also allow a lot of technological boons. So in this case, once BTP and Edgeware are good to go, Icon will presumably be able to use Edgeware to access the Polkadot ecosystem once we are parachained. That's huge, because we'll get access to all of the other Dapps and new projects that are launching there. On our side, one of our core values is just pure interoperability plays. While we're running for Polkadot and we're going to invest heavily into that, we don't want to be overly resilient or reliant on any one path to other chains. So we're working with Harmony, or working with Icon, and we're again, still working with Decred to see what that looks like. Doing bridges to BTC to help get some of those assets, wrapped on us through REM, and there's no end in sight. As long as we have the funding and the technological wherewithal to onboard, bridge maintainers and these relayers and validators, the thought is let's connect it all.
So let's say we're obviously iconists, as they call us, and okay, they flip the proverbial switch on BTP. All of a sudden, there's integration with Edgeware. Obviously, you mentioned the benefits you get from the connectivity with the Polkadot ecosystem as a whole. But in terms of kind of what Dapps within Edgeware itself that are being built or have been built or in the process of being built, what do you want to highlight as far as things that Iconists would have direct access to be able to utilize that you think are particularly notable?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the big one that gets a lot of prestige is Dtrade, and I believe this is dtrade.io. org. Let me check that real quick. So this is a platform for DeFi platform, synthetics, derivatives, options. They're pretty serious and it's extremely polished. I watched a presentation from them recently, and I'm just blown away by how much the team has built over the past couple months. And so they're kind of the premier guys for DeFi and Polkadot. Second from them, we've got Zine, and Zine is taking a really interesting approach to creator economies. So recently, we saw Tezos kind of blow up with this new NFT and art platform called, I'm going to mess up the pronunciation, but I think it's Hic et Nunc, Latin perhaps. And so what we saw is a really good creator economy experience can onboard a ton of artists here to your network. So as Icon thinks about how can they leverage the network, the tools and capabilities of Edgeware, they should also ask themselves, how do the communities that we're onboarding through those apps intersect with the values and purposes of Icon, and how can they strategize towards them? So in Zine's case, it's a WhatsApp integration that allows people to basically get in line for NFTs, which they call like scarce editions, limited editions, and kind of do this referral game or bid up for the chance to buy a limited number of these things. And that leads into an auction. So these integrations with other platforms, which I think is really naturally aligned with Icon's interoperability, and governance purpose right now, as well as new futures, which is complementary to the Zine platform, and that allows artists to come together and form. I don't know, the cabal isn't the right word, but like a DAO that basically allows them to curate and promote and discuss art. So they can use Zine, and if there are tools on an Icon that can speak specifically to that audience, it would be trivial to send over a transaction or get them loaded with an Icon wallet.
And are those already live and launched, or are they in process, or what's the status on those that you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, so D-Trade, the DeFi platform, is probably good to go in about a month or so. We're just kind of wrapping up some final testing. And then Zine is also basically good to go. So they're launching on our EVM side. So when we say launching on EVM, we don't mean like, this is a compatibility layer. It's not necessarily like a totally different side of us.
Right.
So it wouldn't preclude Icon from tapping into the whole of Edgeware to interact with Zine.
Got it.
Tom, I just wanted to circle back, and I want to make sure, and this is going to sound like a dumb question. So, you made mention that you're putting all your efforts in getting on the Polkadot, one of the auction slots. However, now I've understood this, that even if that didn't come to fruition, at the end of the day, you're still securing vital integrations into various crypto ecosystems via BTP, REN, you mentioned, etc. So have I understood that correctly? So you'd still float in your chain is your chain. Getting part of the Polkadot system is a bonus, and you add immense value to that ecosystem. But at the same time, you can still kind of create your own integrations, etc., not dependent on the Polkadot integration.
That's exactly right. To add to that, we're working on another canary net of our own, I think, and the name is going to come out soon. So I'll let you know when it's formally released. It's very funny. I like it a lot, and even if we weren't, for whatever reason, God forbid, totally unexpected, didn't score Polkadot slot, we could potentially bond to Kusama and then use the Polkadot Kusama bridge to tap into that ecosystem. It wouldn't be as efficient or as easy probably, and it would cost us differently in terms of our security, because again, we would be transferring our security to the Kusama layer or the Polkadot layer as a parachain. But we're even exploring new and innovative ways to use the slots where we don't actually plug the chain in directly. We maintain our own sovereign main chain and run what's called a parabridge. This is kind of a fancy new bridge between two substrate chains that would still allow access. So we've got at least 3-4 backup plans for how to stay connected with the broader crypto ecosystem, because we think that's the future. It's not going to be on one chain.
Agree. I'm glad you called this out. It's something we call out, and I guess that's the Icon's goal, right? Interoperability. So, but I have noticed definitely in the last probably year, a fundamental shift from one chain to rule it all to connected chains, with their unique aspects. That's my personal narrative shift that I've noticed. So it's good to see, good to hear as well.
And also there's, people also hear interoperable, and they've kind of assigned okay, this chain's doing interoperable, this chain's doing interoperable, this chain's doing interoperable. Therefore, they're all competitors, and there's going to be one chain to rule them all. Again, it kind of defaults to that behavior. But even then, as kind of we alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, that there's different visions and different approaches to interoperability, and each, the approach that Polkadot has is different than the approach that Icon has, which is different than the approach that Ethereum has, which is different than the approach that Cosmos has. And again, it's easy to lump them all into the same kind of basket with the interoperable stamp. But again, even though there's a whole lot of nuance, and because each one offers different strengths and limitations and weaknesses, it all depends kind of on what each person or organization or chain approaching each one values the most. Is that you kind of see things similar?
I think you've nailed it. What I tell people is, like, in the future, the technology is going to be all modular. In Substrate and Polkadot, all these chains are running the same base kind of WordPress for blockchains. So, that chain has some new cryptography that you like, pop it out, plug it in, and you're good to go. So if capabilities are no longer the moat, it's values. It's what is your community and your chain not willing to do? Are you familiar with the Mastodon or the Fediverse concept?
I'm not.
So Mastodon is a Twitter alternative that basically lets people kind of run their own servers and then decide who they want to interface with. So a lot of people use it to say, I'm not going to interface with that group, but I will interface with these groups, and kind of maintain their own sovereign censorship, or content moderation if they want it. And so it kind of permits indefinite forking, because you can always maintain your own rules and always decide who you want to interface with. So even if, every chain was theoretically able to connect, they wouldn't, for a variety of reasons, because that chain is a maxi and that chain's not, and so they don't want to touch.
Got it. So I guess here's a question with two parts to it. If I'm an Edgeware holder, if I'm a part of the community, if I'm part of the DAO, what do I find to be the benefit from connecting with Icon? On the other side of it, if I'm an Iconist and I hold Icon, what do I find the benefit of connecting with Edgeware? And I think I think we've touched upon a chunk of them, but if you wanted to kind of give kind of a global answer to that, I think that would help kind of sum up why both communities should be excited about this integration.
Absolutely. So in a traditional, open market style approach, there are going to be things that happen on Icon and developers that are on Icon that just do things better. So, we're not maximalists on Edgeware. The point of interoperability is, if you find a stable coin that lives elsewhere, that does what you need it to do, go for it. And here it is. So just giving our developers, more and better options, and not saying that, you have to build on us, you've got to do it in our way. Because crypto has really never advanced using that kind of perspective.
Yeah, it's the same. They always, going back to kind of basic economics classes. It's specialization in trade. There's certain countries that produce certain items or natural resources really, really well and really, really efficiently, and others that don't, but they produce others. So exchanging and trading, and I kind of see something similar where there's one chain doesn't do everything 100% perfectly. So being able to tap into those that are, that have something better, something interesting in a certain category, I think it just, kind of creates a whole lot of, productive leverage overall, and allows everyone to kind of fill in their weaknesses and focus on their strengths. So I think that's a good answer.
Yeah, well said. I guess that's the comparative advantage thesis of interoperability.
Yeah, that was the phrase.
So, Tom, I think, one of the ideas around this as well is to share it not just with the Icon community. It will go through to everyone in the Edgeware community as well, I'm hoping. And I thought, what a great time. I've been in some of your chats in the background, just creeping, not intentionally, just trying to get to know everything going on in the ecosystem. And I thought, so much has been happening. I see so much happening, and what could you share some of the accomplishments, some of the things you really want to kind of boast about yourself and everything the teams have been accomplishing? Share it with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing that I probably talk about the most, besides just being kind of like the first and oldest Substrate smart chain, the really experimental adventure that's been, not without some bumps, is that the lock drop was an amazing token distribution mechanism for on-chain governed networks. It allowed us, so the lock drop basically says, lock up ETH, or any token really, but in our case, we targeted the ETH community for 3, 6, or 12 months. And in return, you'll get a curved amount of edge. And the longer you lock, the more edge you'll get. The sooner you lock, the more edge you got, and the more edge you locked, the more you got. So there's kind of 3 ways that people could interact with this allocation process. And what that did is it allowed the people who maybe didn't have as much ETH as the whales to just wait longer and receive as much as the whales did. And they had a couple different ways, dynamics that they could accomplish that. And what that did for us is create a very long tail of edge holders, many of whom hold, not a lot, but it supports them collaborating and coming together on referenda and proposals to oppose plutocracy, or rule of the wealthy, in a lot of on-chain governed blockchain networks. So we often think about, in the West, plutocracy, or like the income disparity, as being kind of a massive inconvenience for many of us, and potentially like an economic downfall. But in on-chain governed systems is literally a security issue for the network when you use token voting and you have extreme wealth differences. So that was big. It was the first time that had ever been deployed, and it was totally successful. I did an analysis using a factor called the Gini coefficient, and this essentially tries to measure the amount of inequality in wealth in a system. And at launch, ours was thankfully lower than Bitcoin and Ethereum, and the data actually came from like Google's big data project, so a lot of it was out of date from when we did it. But out of the first generation of blockchains, the only one that beat us was Dash, oddly, and it was only for like 2 weeks before plutocracy, reared its ugly head once again. So that was a really great mechanism that we've seen deployed by many other substrate chains since. And then, the third thing I would say is kind of just our progress in governance. We're one of the oldest on-chain governed DAOs, and we have done that natively for so long that we're starting to get out of other groups like Icon say, hey, what's going on here? And so this is kind of our pride and joy, is not only are we a solid technical platform, we've done a good job about maintaining our legitimacy as a community. And we're able to use that legitimacy to help inform the space and contribute to others.
Look, I wanted to ask a little around this, and you touched on it, this Commonwealth Labs, because I noticed there's a dedicated site. When I was digging around, I actually tried to sign up, and because I noticed it was a way to engage with the community and use on-chain voting mechanisms to draft proposals, etc. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't apply just to Edgeware, but any chain can integrate with it.
Well, the next question I was asking, the first thing I went to do was pop Icon in, and it said, wait a while, we're still not accepting new chains yet. Well, what do we need to do to get Icon on there?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a waiting list, I'm not sure that I can pull any levers, because I'm no longer with the Commonwealth Labs, but I can definitely make the referral. And I think community interest is probably the biggest mover. So if Iconists get on Twitter, if they're willing to blast, if they ask hard enough, I'm sure they'll make it happen.
Love it. There we go. A mission at the end as well. Look, Thom, I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're incredibly busy. I feel we've gotten quite a lot of insights from very high level to what makes Edgeware so unique and valuable, not just to the Polkadot, joining the Polkadot ecosystem, but overall just in the crypto ecosystem. Icongrapher, have you got any final questions you want to ask?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything I was curious about. I'm just really excited to continue following Edgeware and get to learn a bit better. But also ultimately look forward to that ultimate day where integration happens and I can start playing around with it through BTP.
Agree. Thom, any closing words?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. The community, not just myself, was super honored to be asked, and we'll certainly be sharing this around as soon as we can. So looking forward to the final.
Awesome, Tom. From my end, you'll probably notice me now start to hound in various chats because I'm keen to start covering off in our weekly news any particular highlights your team has to all Iconus because, as we start interoperating with all the other blockchains, it kind of becomes all our news, so it's valid for everyone. So this is not goodbye, it is kind of like the introduction, and can't wait to keep talking and working with Edgeware.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you again, Tom. Take care.